The universe is a really big place. Though it is believed to be infinite, the resources within it, however, are not. According to the basic rules of commerce, depending on the availability of a particular resource at any given moment, its value can range from, "I'll pay you to take it," to, "I'll take both your arms and your legs and maybe your liver too." Despite the advances in technology, one resource has never been successfully made more available through artificial means, resulting in the nature of the universe keeping its price at a premium. Every species owns at least one of this highly sought-after resource in the form of their cradle world. To find an uninhabited world that is even mildly habitable, that can be lightly terraformed to suit one's preferences, is rare. It is more likely for one to discover a rift to an alternate reality than it is to happen across an unclaimed habitable world while exploring the universe. Entire worlds have become commodities worth more than just the sum of the resources they contain. Emperors hold them up as prized jewels on their crown, trading the lives of millions within their populace for even a mildly habitable world located within the confines of another's arbitrarily defined territorial lines. Location: rift system connecting the Parsekian cluster to the newly accessible Orion cluster. On board the fleet ship Yonturas, Grand Admiral Hondak straightened himself out in the fleet admiral's chair. Centered on the bridge with the captain's chair moved behind and to the left of him, he was able to command the entire fleet from this position. Under his command was the entirety of the Icarinan, his people's invasion fleet, the military-ready fleet of the Fabulga Consortium, and 5 war battalions along with 2 additional battalions for replacements. All recruited from territories he had a hand in annexing back home. They were all far from home, but every soul in the fleet knew the reason for their being here. "We are in geosynchronous orbit, Grand Admiral." A soft squeak yells out across the room, drawing Hondak's attention to the largest view screen located on the bulkhead across from him. The myriad of smaller ones along its peripherals displayed important information such as troop counts, active squad vitals, the fleet's loadout, and even the lunch menu. Hondak admires the view of the green and blue world they were currently in orbit of. A new habitable world for the taking after centuries without, the first of several hundred if the reports were accurate. Though he didn't have any reason to doubt the surveyors, they've never been scandalized with bringing back false information. Put the system up on the main holographic display, focus in on the planet, and can someone replace the lunch menu with the display of the status of our bioship? The displays would be updated to reflect his requests while the holographic projector descends from the ceiling. With an audible click as it locks into place, the space above everyone's heads would light up in a spectacular spectral display of the entire system. Hondak would reach up and caress the tiny asteroids that whizzed by. He never got tired of the holographic system even after all these years. As he had requested, the view would shift such that the planet they orbited now hung just above his head. He reclines his seat, examining its splendor while taking note of the position of his fleet in orbit. Thin tendrils would reach out from his ships, slamming into the planet's atmosphere, reflecting their selective orbital bombardment activities. They were few and far between, doing extremely focused devastation to not cause too much ecological damage. They wanted the planet after all. It would be a mistake to permanently damage its life-supporting capabilities while eliminating the humans. "Is the bioweapon ready for dispersal?" "Bomber squadrons are prepped and entering low orbit, sir. Ready for dispersal on your command." Hondak stood up and took a step forward, approaching the southern pole of the planet as its display shifted overhead to compensate for his change in position. He reaches up to it, letting his fingers slip through the crust. The imagery shivered from their contact till he withdraws. Soon this world will be theirs, then the rest will follow. Cleanse. With the uttering of that singular word, a multitude of points would appear across the face of the world, signifying the various distribution points for the bioweapon fashioned by his bioship. With the realization that habitable worlds were a rarity in the universe, the nature of war had to change. There was no way around it. If an enemy decides to bunker themselves in, destroying the planet around them to claim it for yourself, would be the same as stabbing yourself to sheathe a blade. You would be able to sheathe your blade, sure, but you would also seriously injure yourself in the process. Destroying a world to kill an enemy would not only be pointless, but would go against the very purpose of having waged war in the first place. As a result, new ways to fight had to be thought up, and besides falling back on the old vestige of using troops in large quantities, exotic methods of efficiently eliminating an enemy with minimal collateral damage had to be fashioned. One such method was the use of bioweapons that only targeted a specific genome structure. Since the first human had been captured at the recently stabilized hyperlink between the Parsekian and this once isolated cluster, the fleet's bioship has been hard at work dismantling the human genome to formulate a quick death for them. The formulated bioweapon was then distributed to the carriers of his fleet and carefully loaded into their bomber squadrons for this moment. Grand Admiral Hondak now watched as pockets of yellow fog blossomed from the various distribution points. The black specks of his bomber squadrons rise from the atmosphere, moving back to their motherships as the fog envelops the entire planet. What is the status of our troops on the surface? No casualties reported since bioweapon dispersal. Observers are reporting full casualties on the human side. Fields of their soldiers lay dead, sir. Tell them to begin sweeping the corpses. Capture any survivors for our scientists. The corpses can be recovered for the bioship. Hondak watched as his officers went about coordinating with the rest of the fleet and the armies on the surface to begin carrying out his tasks. Like a well-oiled machine, they'd strip the planet bare of its corpses and ready it for future colonization. Grand Admiral, sir. Hondak turns to face the captain of the Honturas, giving the stout female a nod to speak. We still haven't deciphered a significant portion of the human DNA, sir. Maybe we should be a little more cautious with our approach. We have the rift system now. It is under our control. None of our enemies will be able to slip by to lay claim on any of the other human worlds. The humans themselves have proven to be inferior to us technologically. There is no reason why we shouldn't spend more time studying the abnormalities we uncovered. A fair assessment, Captain, but unfortunately I do not wish to spend the rest of my life claiming one world at a time for our people. Our harvesters have scoured their entire genome structure, and they have found no reason to be wary of what is yet to be deciphered. They believe most of it to be junk sequences according to their latest reports. Have you read it? No? Well, I suggest you take the time to do so when you're not too busy questioning my orders. I plan to secure my legacy with this campaign, Captain. Do not let yourself be an obstacle. I can be a good friend for your career or an unending nightmare. Yes, Admiral. Captain Ompek shakily nods, lowering her gaze in submission and support of her superior's orders before retreating to perform her duties. Hondak glances back at the planet, examining the various points marked out for where troops were currently moving about on the planet's surface. He clicks on one to bring up their feeds. Comms, patch me into this officer, Lort. Down on the planet's surface. Lieutenant Lort felt uneasy as he moved along the edge of the field. His entire company had been dropped off on this continental landmass near the equator, each platoon having their own individualized mission, his being to secure the anchor point the humans had built for their incomplete orbital elevator. The populace here were made up of mostly engineers, but they were an impressively innovative and tenacious bunch. The mechanized walking tank in his platoon bore the marks of that willful tenacity. Designed to survive a suborbital landing without any protection whatsoever, it now had a gaping hole in its chassis where the humans had struck a blow. At least the fight didn't last much longer after that, once the bioweapon began enveloping the region. As he paced the edge of the clearing where the humans had succumbed to the effects of the bioweapon, he notices a slight movement in the distance as a shadowy figure moved through the field of bodies and faded into the fog. For a moment he thought he saw the figure holding on to a rather ancient farming instrument. Before he could investigate it any further, however, the Grand Admiral's call signature appears across his HUD, sending a shiver down his spine. What is the status down there? The Admiral's voice greets him over his helmet speakers. Greetings, Grand Admiral, sir. I think your comms officer must have patched you into the wrong interlink. This is Lieutenant Lort, sir, not Captain Tabga. If you'd like, I can get my comms officer to... I contacted your platoon directly, Lieutenant Lort. My comms officer didn't get it wrong. Now please update me on the situation on the surface as I've requested. Yes, sir. The enemy is no longer a threat, sir. The bioweapon did its trick. They all fell down like flies, clawing at their throats. Yes, I do not need to hear the details of their valiant struggles. I honestly just wanted to know if they're all dead and if we can send down the scavengers to pick up the corpses. They should be, sir. I think I saw some movement, but... Movement? Our scanners are picking up nothing other than the life signs of our soldiers. Can you confirm that you saw movement? No, sir, I cannot. It might have been just an illusion. The light coming through the fog is rather distorted. Lort regretted even thinking of mentioning what he thought he saw as soon as he heard the Grand Admiral let loose a long sigh over the comms. He gritted his molars, waiting for his commission to be rescinded. Take your platoon out across the clearing to meet up with the others of your company. We are reading their heat signatures north of your position. Get your soldiers to check the human bodies for any signs of life. Use your hands to find a pulse if you have to. I do not want any survivors to slip by unnoticed. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I do. I will make... Click. Hello? Grand Admiral. Sir. Lord glances over at his comms officer, who shrugs sheepishly back at him. He groans, shaking his head as he begins relaying their new orders, herding his platoon out across the field and into the thick yellow fog. As he began moving across the field, his men and women would begin firing out randomly as they spotted movements. Every moving shadow drew bursts of fire before silence washes over them once again. It was nerve-wracking, but the situation only grew worse as wind blows through, sweeping the fog aside to reveal a small contingent of humans still standing, their hungry eyes staring back at them as their lips pull back to reveal teeth stained blue. All it took was the snap of someone stepping on dried vegetation for things to be thrown into a sudden frenzy. Back on the Honduras. Grand Admiral Hondak glances over towards the large screens where the fleet's stats were being displayed. He notices a group of his bridge officers scurrying to one of the terminals as the biosigns of several soldiers on the planet began to show problems. What is going on? He queries loudly as he steps in their general direction. Several troopers are encountering weird phenomena down on the surface, sir, one of the officers replies as she turns around. She waves off the junior officer manning the terminal nearby, motioning them away as she transfers her terminal from her previous station to her current one. They are reporting bioscanners supplying false life signs, showing supposed neural activity in bodies long dead from the bioweapon. Medics are finding no physical life signs, and commanders have taken upon themselves to shoot any body still showing life signs on scanners. But even still, the scanners are showing sporadic signatures that can't be identified. I'm trying to get our low-orbital ships to double-check the readings using their sensors, but that might take a little while, sir. Hondak says nothing, nodding along to the assessment. He was amazed with the young officer's initiative, taking special note to bring her up on commendations at a later date. If she showed sufficient promise, he might even see to getting her a command of her own. Who knows, maybe Captain Ompek could be convinced to step aside before they move further into human territories. Hondak comes out of his daydream as he notices the officer and a few of her compatriots looking at him. He quickly waves his hand and nods. Continue. Your plan sounds good. Thank you, sir. As the officers turn their attention back to their terminals, a junior officer across the room calls out frantically, Sirs, Company 12 is under attack from humans. How many? Unknown, sir. It seems the bioweapon didn't have any effect on any of them within the region. They just started waking up and began attacking. Company 52 is reporting a similar situation, sirs. Another voice yells out from the other end of the room. Hondak watches as the bridge slowly erupts into a frenzy of yelling voices and growing disarray as conflicting information is being relayed around. He glances up at the world hovering above his head, watching dozens of pop-up alerts begin coloring its surface as reports continue to flood in of the humans' sudden reprisal. It seems his scientists might have gotten it wrong with their design of the bioweapon. Sirs, I've got reports of weapons being ineffective. Losses along the northernmost continent are rising. We are losing our foothold at point. We just lost a shuttlecraft along the... Bioscanners can't pick up. Life signs are growing erratic. Movement reported at... Sir. Hondak turns around just in time to see Captain Ompek fall to the ground with her hands to her throat. Her pristine white uniform slowly turning blue as blood continued to seep through her fingers at an uncontrollable rate. Her attacker stood by the bridge's entryway, still smiling at him, Ompek's blood running down his chin and shirt as the human officer raises both of his clenched fists, displaying the armed incendiaries in his grasp. Hondak would notice the two charred blots on the human's uniform where plasma bolts had struck, presumably putting him down before he was brought up to the ship for his scientists to examine. How was it that they had missed this part of their life cycle, he did not know. The human opens its mouth, but no words came forth for the bridge translators to work with. Just a crackle of grunts and wet squeals before it runs one hand over its own throat and points a broken digit at Hondak. It lets loose another wet cackle. Hondak watches as the human lowers both arms, pulling its lips back in a sickly display of ferocity before tossing the incendiaries in its grasp at the unaware officers still running around behind Hondak. On board the bioship Theseus, we have confirmed with the Kelpec the explosions on the Jonturus bridge resulted in a hull rupture. Bulkheads were reported to have come down and sealed the breach, but the Grand Admiral is believed to be amongst those lost. Captain Griseldo shook her head in disbelief as the reports came in. Any word on who is next in command? Admiral Tomgat of the Fiboga Consortium fleet is vying for command of the entirety of the fleet, but none of the captains have yet responded. Everyone who has taken on human corpses for further studies are reporting deck-to-deck battles, and even several of our ships who did not are reporting signs of sickness. Captain, we are reporting some abnormalities within the ship's ecology. There is some kind of virus running loose across the organic matrix. We've identified it as human in origin, but we can't identify its method of infection or source. The replicators just suddenly began spewing the viral loads out on Deck 15, where the first human captured was brought on board. Well, let's isolate. Captain, Ensign Fogast is seizing. We need help. Oh my gods, Hellsmith just bit off my fingers. Captain Griseldo turns from the sudden bloody mess towards the curious figure of a human partially digested by the ship's recyclers, its mouth opening, letting loose a sickly wet cackle.